sorry?
Speak loud, exactly. Alexander Kuzmenko is here. I'm a person who stutter.
Eugene Wasowski Gallagher is here.
Rama Siva.
Tom Wheeler.
So Rama is our special guest for today.
Hello.
Hello. So I've met Rama many years ago, I think 12 years ago. 12, 13.
Big years.
Probably. And it was only very briefly, so I remembered you, but you didn't remember me, because, I don't know, there's a lot of people to meet at the course we're on, so it's a good opportunity to have you back and to meet you again.
Thank you. It's great to be here and meeting Alex for the first time and Tom.
All right. Well, Rama is a internationally famous and well-published and well-known author. Wrote a couple of books, made a couple of editions. My English, oh, fuck it. And the new book is coming. And each time we speak to each other, like I hear you have those interesting ideas about what you did with your stutter and how you feel it and what you think about it. And it's very different from what I hear every day about it. And we are all connected into these chats and stuff. So we discuss the stuttering thing. So dude, tell us like what stuttering is, what do you think about it?
For me, stuttering defined my life until the age of 41. My son is now approaching 2 years old, and as a new father, I really was a bit apprehensive as to how my son might also have this stammering habit. I would say stammering is a habit because I developed it as a child from the age of 8. I stumbled from 3 to 4. That's when my parents told me that I stumbled over my words, and a lot of children do stumble. And for some reason, when I was 8, I was reading out in class and I stumbled quite a bit. And the teacher then sent me to the speech therapy jail. So I was stuck in speech therapy jail for the past 30 years. And it's only now that I am free from the mentality of being in the jail. The reason why I call it jail is that I felt trapped within my own mind in terms of what I could do in my life. The speech wasn't a major issue, it was how I actually felt as a human being interacting with other human beings. Writing my first book, Rich Thinking, I realized that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience on this earth. Whatever religious background you're coming from, the truth is we are all spiritual beings, and we will return to the spirit and reincarnate at some point if we choose to. So stuttering defined my life, and it was a big part of my life. It meant that I held back from doing anything. I was Mr. Avoid, Mr. Holdback. I was Mr. Holdback. We have Simon, who's Mr. No Holding Back. I was Mr. Holdback. And I wasn't proud of it. I was very ashamed of myself, and it took me a long time.
So at what age exactly would you say that you realised that you were Mr. No Holding Back, or a different version of Mr. No Holding Back? Did you lose your inhibitions?
I would say in the last year, the last 2 years since I wrote the book, I actually faced some great fears. One was to contact people who were quite famous, like the manager of Djokovic. When I first thought about contacting him, I thought he wouldn't bother replying to me, but he did, and we had a great interview, and he shared that he had learning difficulties. So for me, listening to someone so successful in life telling me his life story about him having difficulties, and his mother's belief in him made him the man he was, because then he developed a belief in himself. He went to LSE, he did the bar exam in New York, and he became a tennis promoter. He had other number ones under his management. That's what changed. Interviewing people, facing the fear that even though I stumbled over a few words, it didn't mean that I had to stutter.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
So that was it.
Do you think that there is a relationship with you losing your inhibitions and your child being born? Because you said that your child is what, 2 years old?
He's approaching 2 years.
Approaching 2 years, and his birth occurred at roughly the same time that you lost your inhibitions, right? So
Yes, at that time I was in the process of writing my book, and then I went on to BBC Radio to face another challenge, which was to actually speak in public. I'd been on a speech therapy program for many years, and within the speech or the stuttering community bubble, as I call it, my speech was fantastic. I was Mr. Fantastic. I would speak to anyone without any problem, using good technique, using full coastal breathing, whatever breathing techniques anyone would prescribe. I was perfect. Went back the following day to my job, my speech fell apart. And that repeated over a number of courses that I went on. I call them 3-day fixes. So I went back for a fix to get my speech therapy high again, my fluency high again, went off into the real world, then my speech fell apart.
using it as a top-up.
Yes.
So to follow a bit on from Tom's question, would you say that having a kid has meant you had a transition from caring what people thought about you to caring what people thought about your son, and as a result, has you shifted your focus from yourself? That meant you well, it's like as you didn't have to take care of your own ego so much, you don't have any of the worries, fears, and all the rest of it. So has that, like, would that help explain it? Your transition?
I think that's a great question, Eugene. For me, watching my son from a newborn to a toddler starting to walk and smile at people, it made me think, what's stopping me from smiling at people? So when he smiles at people and waves to them, they actually smile and wave back because it's a baby. But as an adult, I would never smile or wave at anyone. I'm very self-conscious. But I learned that from my son, to actually be a bit more relaxed, connect with people, and they will connect back with you.
The courses you mentioned and those top-ups, what's the program called? What's the therapy you went to?
Oh, I can't remember. It's been such a long time.
Let me remind you. Is it called Maguire, maybe?
Yes, I believe that rings a bell. I've been on so many courses.
Well, when we spoke, and somehow in my head, I had a feeling that all this revelation started with you after Maguire. Like, that give you this initial push when you, like, is it true? Or,
For me, what Maguire gave me in 2001, bearing in mind we are now in 2018, so that is 17 years on from my first course. In 2001, I was working in Downing Street. I used to work at the Prime Minister's office in London when Tony Blair was the Prime Minister. And my speech there was atrocious. atrocious. It was only at work that I stuttered like a parrot. Really, that bad. I went on this 4-day course. Thursday, I was a semi-covert overt stutterer. So I was able to do the first day speech without any major hiccups. There was one Oscar-winning performance from a guy. He had a stutter that was unbelievable. And the transformation that he had was out of this world. After the 4 days, he was a miracle. That course helped him enormously after 4 days. For me personally, it helped me do public speeches, get up on a soapbox and realize that I can do public speeches when I'm the center of attention. The second insight it gave me was I could speak with other stutterers perfectly with no fear at all. Those are the two insights that I gained from the course. Third one was going into support groups. I call them AA support groups, because you go into a support group, you act as if you're fine, or I did. I acted as if I was fine. I was perfectly using technique. I went out, I was Mr. No Holding Back, Mr. No Simon. I was Mr. No Holding Back. It wasn't about my speech, it was about holding back. It was me not expressing myself like I am now. Now, 17 years on, I've written a book, I've had a son, I've got married. Those are the things which changed my life. Not a 4-day program. The 4-day program will give you the technique. You need a technique to control your breathing. Because as a stutterer, my breathing was fucked up. That's the word I would use. Okay?
That's a good one.
The technical term, fucked up.
I would hyperventilate, have panic attacks,
That's right.
like that.
Yep.
We've all been there, okay? So, the technique,
I'm still there. No, I'm not there.
the technique shows you how to breathe, but that technique is not proprietary to any program. Opera singers use it. All other programs use it. You can't copyright breathing. You can't copyright breathing. Only God can copyright breathing. My son.
He's good.
Okay.
I'm the good one.
One question, as from my experiences when I was doing speech therapy of any form, right, the biggest change to me was meeting other stammerers, because
100%.
up until that point I thought I was literally the only one who had this problem, as everyone I spoke to was fine. I was like, I just thought, like, mentally in my head, everyone stammered, but just everyone somehow controlled their speech better than me. Like, it never occurred to me that I was the odd one out. Would you? I'm not 100% sure where that thought was heading, but would you say, like, or has meeting other? Yeah, here's the question, right? Has meeting other stammerers helped you in any way, like speech-wise, support-wise, or anything like that, as opposed to interacting with fluent speakers?
That's a fantastic question, Eugene. When I was 18, I had the misfortune to go to a speech therapy course for 2 weeks. I was in a hospital. I was I can't even say the word. I was
institutionalized. I can't say it.
I can't say it either. Anyway,
Institutionalized.
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 I was institutionalized for 2 weeks. And there I met a guy who was 18 years older than me. And he stuttered like a parrot. And so in my mind, I had the belief that I would stutter forever. because he was 18 years older than me. I thought he knew more of the world, so I really thought that I would stutter forever. But the speech therapy helped me. I learned about prolongation, I learned about cancellation, and it helped me in terms of my speaking. So I was able to speak, but it did create a belief in my mind that I would stutter for a long time, or maybe forever. And going back to your question, so in 2010, when my mom died, I took some time out. I stayed with my dad, and I went traveling, and traveling really helped me because I was out there with other people just speaking, and if I blocked, I blocked, and it didn't really bother me that much. Okay, because I blocked.
Yeah.
And I think actually traveling was one of the things which really helped me. So I would recommend traveling, just to get out there, face your fears, enjoy life, enjoy speaking with people.
So the meeting other stammers actually was a negative experience. That was not what I was expecting.
I think meeting the guys on the Maguire program recently, when I met Ramesh, yes, because I took a break. I took a break from the from the stuttering program or the stuttering community, but I wanted to find someone who lived close to me, and I saw that Ramesh lives in Letchworth. So I found Ramesh. You told me about Mr. Ayo Adesanya, who told me about Mr. Ruben, and then I knew about Mr. Alex and Eugene and Tom just afterwards.
Cool.
But prior to meeting Ramesh, I didn't really want to meet other stutterers because I didn't want my mentality to be dragged into the stuttering, holding back scenario of the AA meetings. I'm really sorry, but the truth was, AA meetings was what it was for me. I'm being honest now. I was a fake. I'm sorry, but I'm coming out.
Cool.
That's interesting that you said that traveling was a really big one for you, because I recently did like the first kind of proper traveling experience about 4 or 5 months ago now, when I went to Israel for a few months on exchange. And my speech by the start was kind of like, oh, it's all right, it's okay. But suddenly, when I arrived there and I kind of started to settle down, I had the most incredible levels of fluency I never really thought before. And it was because I was totally pushed outside of my comfort zone. I was having to, sort out like visa issues and stuff like that on my own. And it was a kind of a case of being like basically my comfort zone was so far pushed as opposed to just talking to people on the street. It was like having to like deal with paperwork and stuff with people who weren't necessarily that fluent in English and stuff like that. That was the biggest push. I think really it was how challenging it was and how far my comfort zone had to be broken that made my speech a lot better. And since then I've kind of continued. But what I will say though really is about I have been for some time now of the opinion that life events have I think one of the biggest influences on the speech, and I've noticed that on the Maguire program and in fact on other programs or therapy things that I've been to, for instance I've been attending the VSA support group now for a while. I've also been to their events and stuff, and I've noticed that the older you are, in general, as a rule of thumb, the less you stutter. And also, the more you are settled in your life, be that through marriage, having children, having a reliable income, you aren't too stressed at work, the less you stutter in your life. At least so it seems from the outset. So, in my opinion, I think a lot of this fluency, and you seem very, very fluent, or at least you stutter less, stems from a feeling of being settled and being like life has kind of reached a very nice plateau which didn't have before. And I think for people my age who stutter, mid-20s, tends to be a lot harder because nothing's settled and you're trying to make your way in life and also negotiate the idea of, am I going to get married? Who am I going to get married to? What clothes shall I wear? So I think life stress is, in my opinion, one of the biggest, if not the biggest things about that affect your stutter personally? So,
I have to agree.
So to bring it back around nicely, so what would you say is the best way to get yourself into that like relaxed, self-comforting, or what's the right word? Like self-assertive, sort of,
self-assurance.
yeah,
Can feel relaxed.
self-assured sort of state. Like perhaps not just about speech, but like just to
By a
have your
holistic thing.
yeah. How to have that? What's the best way to get to that lifestyle where you're just sort of flowing?
Well, one of the things which I've been doing very recently is to try and meditate. I try and quieten my mind to try and listen to my thoughts and kind of observe it. While doing the research for my upcoming book called Dreaming of Stuttering Freedom, which is part of the Stuttering Mind series, I interviewed a fascinating guy. He's a neurosurgeon from the US, and he wrote 3 books. One is called Proof of Heaven, second one Map of Heaven, and the last one is called Living in a Mindful Universe. And he works with a lady by the name of Karen Newell, who runs sacredacoustics.com, and that's basically a meditation app. So you can download a free version or free Om player of the Sacred Acoustics app from iTunes, and I listen to that and try and calm my mind down.
When you said you listen to your thoughts, like what does that entail? Is it like your like deepest inner thoughts, or like what sort of
Yes.
are we talking about? Just to get some
Sure.
more clarity.
So I'll explain it fully. So for
Okay.
this particular track, I listened to a track, an MP3 track for 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and where they play the sound Om. So you try and get the feeling of Om vibrating through your body, and you listen to it. And if any thoughts come, you try and let it go, and you get back to the Om.
Yeah.
So you try and have a single focal point of a word.
Yeah.
After that, I do a 5-minute visualization of what I want to happen in my life, because I believe firmly in visualization. And other things include being aware of your body. So as I stated at the beginning, I believe we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, and it's very difficult for me to explain it unless you take the time to read more about it. It's not something new that I've come across. If you watch the movie The Secret, they touch on it. The law of attraction also discusses it as well. What do you think, Alex?
Well, I think the law of attraction, this whole character bullshit, it's just a different name for karma concept. And of course, if you having a bad thoughts, if you're always fearful, whatever you fear the most, it will always happen to you. If you're thinking about negative things, it's all you really see in life. So you have to change the angle of view. But the law of attraction, yeah, visualization, it works. But somehow everyone who comes to those understandings and the concept of karma, of course, if I do bad, the bad things will happen to me. All people who come to this understanding, they already have some life experience, and they got to this understanding almost themselves, and that's why they able to see, oh, now the whole new chapter of library opens to me, and that people already thought about. So maybe you arrive there, and then you just seek the confirmation of your thinking you already possess. I know that many people, especially after Maguire, when they got better, when they started using all those techniques, they just can't believe that how much Maguire really helped them. So, and they say, oh no, it's not a Maguire that helped me. It's not a prolongation or cancellation that I use constantly now. They trying to find all the reasons. But I agree with you. This imagine, believe, achieve, it works. If you seen yourself in 10 years being in prison, this is where you hide it.
That makes a very interesting point, which it hasn't occurred to me so far, but it just occurred to me now from your explanation that in many ways it means stammering, we're a victim of confirmation bias. So
That's
we
right.
stammer, then we convince ourselves we can do nothing but stammer, because we confirm it with every interaction we have. We stammer.
Yeah, well,
Everyone thinks we stammer, so therefore we feel if we don't stammer, we're lying to ourselves.
I wouldn't say that is exclusively a stammering thing like that.
But
That can be applied to most things in life. If you do something and it's a negative reaction, you naturally assume that the next attempt will be the same. It's just that's how
yeah,
anything in life
no,
works.
as in, like, if you take the view of it purely confirmation bias, and like, this is just to take this logic to its extreme in the
Okay.
hopes it breaks down along the way, because if it works all the way, then it has to be true.
Yeah, okay.
So we're just going to keep testing it.
Okay.
So, because one of the things I noticed is that if I stammered with one person once, I feel anxious if I don't stammer with them the next time.
Ooh.
I have to stammer with them.
That's very interesting.
Even though the stammering was really awkward and would take me a long time to say the word,
Yeah.
I felt if I spoke to them next time without stammering, even if that was possible for whatever reason, I'd feel bad. If I stammered, I'd also feel bad. So I was like, but I did have to talk to them anyway. So I was like, I was in essence like stuck between a rock and a hard place, and as a result, every interaction would reinforce it. Like I would be confirming all my own biases. Like it wasn't just the stammering bias, like from being unable to speak. It was all the perception of me being unable to speak, which there's that weird part of you which you want to keep. You want to keep that perception that you're a stammerer.
A more extreme example of confirmation bias and stuttering is I used to be floundering up my speech. I had no idea what was causing it, what was going wrong, and I used to believe in such fastidious things as I thought that, like, you know, certain nuts, as in like almonds, cashew nuts, would enhance my fluency because I would associate eating cashew nuts with fluency, and then this is how all animals work. Like, you know, there's studies of pigeons where pigeons get fed at like random times, and then pigeons start to believe that there's some kind of sequence to it when it's totally random. Like it's like a 1 in 1,000 chance to be fed at this particular time. It's just a case of how animals work, isn't it? Just
And we have this confirmational bias in terms of law of attraction and this secret bias as well, because we only see what we want to see, only what feeds our ego. So if we would try to look beyond and above that and to dig into those people, like this dickhead Tony Robbins. He's the worst. And if you read about Bob Proctor, what he done in his life, he has more haters of him than he has people who like him. He hurt many people financially. He schemed people out of money. But you know, we don't see that. We only see the result of him trying to improve himself being a bad person. And when he had the realization we have right now, all he did, he stole all other ideas and make a book out of it. Like all those books of Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, or Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You read them all, you become fascinated. So what he really did, he don't really have a job. So all he does is teaching people how to do things, the things that he cannot do. So I would be very careful to buy into that religion as well completely, because you might get hurt in the end.
Can I ask you who Bob Proctor is?
Yeah, I was thinking the same question.
It's a guy who made the law of attraction, like TV popular, and the one who was selling this secret movie on Amazon for $10.
Okay. So cheeky.
Oh, yeah, and I'll take over this thing. So I think that being speech language pathologist, especially for people who stutter, if it's all you do,
Yeah.
you lose the touch with reality. Maybe when you start to treat people, yeah, you out of a job, you know how people interact, but when you spend 10 years doing only teaching for people who stutter, life moves on, comfort zone twitches and moves and changes. So now what was okay 10 years ago not enough, they lose control, they lose touch with reality, and they can only make people fluent in the room.
I have a opinion or rather story to share from a friend who's involved in stuttering neuroscientific research, and after several years doing his PhD, he is now in a way desensitized to people's stuttering problems, and he sees them as like, and he's just like whatever, you know. I've seen it before, and I can kind of get that, and also like I've noticed myself that the more I've been on the course, the more I've kind of spoken with stuttering people, and I think this occurred most significantly when I went to the Manchester support group, which isn't a Maguire support group, it's just a BSA one. I actually think it's like an independent one even. Anyway, and there's this guy who was there who had stuttered for like 45 years, and he never told anyone about it. He lived as like a hermit, you know. Basically his life was dictated by the stammer, and he'd come to this for the first time. Like it's the first time he ever met anyone else who stuttered. And I'd just been doing for the past few weeks like lots of phone calls with people who stutter, and this poor guy was like, you know, sobbing and stuff, like, oh my god, that's the most beautiful moment ever. And I was just like, whatever, you know, I've seen it all before, you know, it's an amazing moment, but I've seen it all before. So I can kind of get the whole, they do get desensitized, and you also get almost like an ivory tower feeling of how can I kind of see this in more like an experimental approach and treat, you know, it's just, it does, I think it is important to have like a real world, basically just get the real world in more than it is the teaching in the room, and that's why I think the contacts that Eugene is so keen to get up and running again in London has to be the top priority, because you can do support groups till kingdom come, you can live like an island with other people who stammer if you really wanted to, and I tell you what, you'd all be fluent, but that isn't the problem, is it?
All about breaking down your your own biases.
Yeah.
Whatever those biases are, you have to break them down.
Very
Like,
true.
if it's the perception of being perceived as fluent, you have to break that one down.
Smash
because
that one.
As that is randomly a fear.
The hardest one to actually
Yeah,
break
yeah,
sometimes.
it's like we stammer, we fear being fluent. You're like, what the hell happened there? Is the fear of being perceived as a stammerer of course, the exact opposite, which is another fear. And you just have to go around whatever fear you tackle. You also have to tackle the polar opposite, because otherwise you shift your balance away from just being freaking normal in the middle, which is where you're supposed to be.
Can I ask a question, Malcolm? Do you consider stuttering a disability?
That's a good question, Tom. When I was looking for my first full-time job, permanent job, I actually ticked disability, and I had a stutter. So yes, in the past I had a disability, stuttering.
It's changed now.
And now I would say I no longer feel the need to tick the box. So from my point of view, I don't need to tick the box. But I think for each and everyone, it is their decision, because it helped me get interviews. But when I got to the interviews, my stutter was out of control. So I didn't get a job anyway. So it was a waste of time.
Yeah.
What are other people's opinions on stuttering as a disability?
I personally, whenever anyone's asked about it, I tick no, I don't have a disability, and then underneath it write I have trouble speaking. Because I'm like, you will not get me to tick yes, as I don't count it as something which holds me back. It's a pain in the ass, but it isn't something that holds me back. Like, if I, as like, this actually reminds me of another podcast I'm listening to. It's called the TED Radio Hour. So they interviewed this dude who climbed a mountain. He got stuck for 3 days because of a blizzard, and then had to have his legs amputated below the knee. So his view is he isn't disabled because a disability holds you back.
Okay.
He used a different word to say it's like transformed or something like that. So he isn't the same as everyone else, but he doesn't count as a disability because he's in his case he's been working on artificial legs to make climbing for him much easier than everyone else. so that's why
legs.
he refuses to tick that he has.
Stilts, isn't he? He's climbing up a mountain like 5 minutes. He's just walking like 10 meters a day. Genius.
And here's the thing. That's why I wouldn't count it as a disability, as I have learned so much from stammering.
Okay.
That I wouldn't have learned if I didn't stammer.
Okay.
So that's why I tick no, and I have trouble speaking.
Okay. Alex, do you consider it?
I used to not like being labeled with stuff. I would say more precise, my ego didn't like some labels, like disabled label.
Disabled label. Great name. Disabled label.
Like, I don't know, like this and other labels. For example, when I was getting my army degree, right, they told me, well, you can't like move up in the ranks because at some point you will have to have an order to give order to your people, and you will stutter. They will all die. So I'm like, yeah. So that was kind of like, what the hell, right? But nowadays, since well, I'm not that old, you know, like being on Tom's subject, but I think I had so much experiences. Like maybe I had more experience that 60-year-old would have now. So at this point, I'll put labels whatever you want on me, because they don't stick.
Yeah.
Like if you label me disabled, sure, but then you have to label me with genius as well. It's all about in comparison. When I send my resume, my CV, if I see like you're disabled, like hell yeah, do you have a yeah, I do have this problem. Just call me for interview. You know, like I'm not my resume.
Basically, get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
yeah,
part of what you're saying.
true. Well, yes, and I'm not afraid of being labeled anymore.
So that brings another interesting question. Like, so we were just saying, like, ticking the "I have a disability" box means someone's asking you.
Yeah.
So what about the other way around? Is on any advert you put out, like say like CV or whatever, do you advertise it there, or like
That's a very good point.
as that's a
Because that's like, you haven't reached that stage where you're having to tick boxes.
yeah,
You're basically
yeah,
advertising.
yeah. 'Cause-
Well, I've recently been applying for jobs, and I actually thankfully have landed one. It's only like a 11-hour-a-week kind of studenty job, but I've still got that one. And I said, not in my advert, but in my application, I said I have a stutter. I just thought that if I said that, you know, what would be their problem if I had a stutter? But yeah, so that's useful. My opinion with the whole disability for a stutter is that I think it's almost like having insurance. So for instance, most days at work, I speak very well, I think. But it's just one or two times, or one or two days I don't speak very well. And having the bit of paper saying I stutter means that when I do really stutter, and I stutter quite a lot on those days, then it's okay, because I have that legal box like, oh, it's actually okay, rather than we didn't know about it,
Yeah.
and now it's your time to move on because you have a stutter and we didn't know about that. So I think it's just better, and it also helps the employer
yeah.
if you tell them or your boss that you stutter, because then then it's just everyone's a lot more relaxed about the whole process.
Sorry. So, can I ask my follow-on question before I share? Like, so, when you stammer and work, like, do you sort of shrug it off, laugh, and then just continue stammering like a beast, or?
Well, I'll say that it really does depend on my job. So I've been working as a waiter recently. Thankfully, I'm now ditching that job. But as a waiter, there isn't really time, because, for instance, you're serving plates quite fast paced. You can't afford to be like, oh, guys, it'll happen again. But I would say that often in jobs, if it's a slow pace, I'll just continue stuttering. I don't really tend to control my speech very much when I'm at work. But then again, it does depend very much on the nature of work. And I'm sure if you're working in an office job, it's very different.
That question was more about your response to stammering.
My response is generally okay.
Like, if you stammer, like, my response in work, if it's a particularly bad day and I realise I'm gonna freaking stammer, every sentence I say, every word I say, I'm gonna freaking stammer. So I just start stammering, then start laughing it off, tell everyone I have a really bad speech day. Like, you're just gonna have to get used to it, because it ain't gonna improve. Just and like, that's what sort of keeps me with a healthy mentality.
But surely that is part of why you should tell people that it is like a disability, because if people are now having to wait for you for an extra minute to finish your sentence, then surely it's slowing the company down. If we're thinking about money as time, kind of stuff. So with that logic, surely the company also needs to know, for their sake, that they have someone there too, so they can accommodate for you and make allowances to suit someone.
I don't think I've ever mentioned I stammer on my CV.
No?
No. I've turned out to interview stammering like a beast.
Advertise it in the room.
Every single interview I've ever done, stammer like a beast. The one I was super fluent on, I didn't get the job.
No way. See, there we go. It's not.
So-
People don't often care so much about your fluency. It's more about have you got the skills to pay the bills.
And like on the job, I just simply tell them like, I'm gonna stammer. Nothing you can do about it, nor me. So let's just freaking crack on with the actual job. And I just sort of, maybe it's my just personality. Like I like sort of shrug it off with a bit of humour, and then sometimes that helps my speech, but normally I just could go back to stammering and continue for the rest of the day. So like, it's not going to improve,
basics.
just leave it be.
Back to basics.
I'm
sorry.
My question to you was, by putting it on your CV that you stutter, does it free you to be yourself and help you to relax in the interview? Do you feel relaxed because you've
Yes.
already done that?
A lot more, because I don't have to go through the whole, hello, I'm Tom, and I stutter. And I feel that if they know already, there is less pressure. I'd be more than happy to tell it in the interview, but I'd rather they would know things up front, so they can make that decision before I go through the interview and potentially waste their time. So I think that it's just better if you have everything down on paper right away.
Cool. What do you think? Like, do you?
Never. I've never put on my CV that I stutter. But I've ticked the disability box. But next time I might choose no, and then I have a stutter.
So, like, it's weird that there's completely different approaches to like, how we each have.
I will say though, that I think perhaps this is a more contemporary thing. I think that disability rights and so on has become increasingly more prolific in the public eye over the past 10 years, whatever. So I think that's that maybe for my generation it's more common to do this kind of stuff, maybe.
What is your generation, Tom?
I don't know.
Because I'm
Generation Z,
I'm
Generation
pretty sure
10.
I'm in there. I think.
How old are you again?
30.
Yeah, that's like 8 years older than me.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe
We
not.
can't say
So it's a bit, yeah, no, it's a
That
bit
means you're
different.
not mid-20s, man.
Like early 20s.
Okay, early 20s.
I
That's
think-
more accurate.
If I'm almost 23, and I'm typically in like
so
6 months. So.
we're not the same age group. I'm
Okay.
gonna go with.
Anyway, my generation, I believe that my generation is increasingly more like I am X, Y, or Z, and they know exactly what they define themselves as.
But will that like? I'm just like this has probably nothing to do with anything sensible. It's just where my brain's going on this one. Do you reckon that will cause problems in the future? Like,
There are problems with everything. I think there will definitely be problems associated with it. But it's a case of preferences, I think, with
Yeah.
this. So there'll be problems with not putting it on the CV. Equally, there'll be problems with putting it on the CV. So I think there'll always be problems associated.
my question was more about like, if you pick a label, you also therefore have to pick an identity. So, yeah.
That's a great point.
So if you pick any identity, and you have more identities, for
Yeah.
instance, like if you say I have a disability, that is an identity. But then there's also numerous subgroups and
Yeah.
tiers of subgroups
Everyone's
as well.
different,
Yeah, because in essence you end up with an identity of one after you've gone through all of them. But the problems will more likely be with the fact that it sort of splits people up.
Arguably, but we don't know
rather than
that.
sort of uniting, and that was what I was more thinking about.
I do see that point,
Mm.
but we don't know that.
No, that's true.
And you know, I think like
What do you
everyone is
believe?
different.
What do you believe? Do you believe by writing on your CV that you have a stutter? Do you believe that you will stutter?
Well, I don't really mind either way that I stutter or not
Mm.
in the interview, frankly. But I think it's better if they know for any future employment that I stutter. And for the interview, that if I stutter or not. I think I only do it to make my listener more understanding. Because often people don't understand what's good.
Yeah.
And maybe this person having a speech is So I think it's just better if they know. I would be fine with not writing it on my CV and going in. I would rather that it just becomes my talking point.
Yeah.
I just want to do the interview as best I can. And the stuff is just like, yes, we know it. That issue's over and done with. It's behind us.
So, my view for putting it on your CV has it has flipped on its head. So
Okay.
I want to share what my original view was, and
Okay.
then what the view is now. So originally the view was you put your thing on your statement on your CV because it would give you an advantage,
No,
right?
no advantage.
So,
Or maybe.
but if it's to what has like big, because of how there's a bigger push to have people with disabilities employed, it would offer an advantage. So
Okay.
same as if you're from a minority group, you would be. Companies have to employ
That's a quota.
certain amounts of each group, and they want the best people who also happen to
I
fit
get
into these groups, which is great.
I think that's also a component, but I don't see much wrong with it.
but-
I think, you know, society is implementing those policies for a very good reason, and I think we would be kind of fools not to take it sometimes.
But so now, from your explanations, it's also clicked into place there. What you really want to do is just here's the flag.
Yeah.
It's in the ground. Now can I have a proper interview? Ignore the speech completely, which is
I wouldn't say totally, but partly.
which that is a very different viewpoint to the one I had originally.
Okay.
Which is like all you want to do is be treated exactly like anyone else who spoke fluently, but as you're saying, I know I stammer, you know I stammer.
Move on.
Move on. Yeah.
But
Which,
basically.
that's what I wanted to share as I understand your
Okay.
viewpoint now. I was like, that's amazing.
I'm glad we've reached a conclusion on that one.
So,
Let's move on.
No,
we should.
It's my turn now. I think we have to think of 2 reasons why we advertise. There is an external reason. This is other world, and there is internal reason for myself why I do it. So when we're doing it for to get into interview, that can be a trickery we doing because of the reasons of external world dictates us to do it. So this is one reason why we should or not should put our stuttering disclosure. In my case, of course, I use all the trickery I can use for my advantage. I'm thinking
Russian
rich,
style.
you know, Russian. Right?
Mafia.
But I have my internal reasons as well why I do it, for my mindset, for my psychology. So the reason why I do it internally is because I know that I have a void in personality. I don't want to come out of my stuttering closet, and I know that it's bad for my speech. It's a psychological thing which becomes technical. So I have to approach my psychology in a technical way, which is the easiest way for me. So I say that I stutter everywhere, including the YouTube. Like, come on, look at us. We're doing it for everyone, but that's for me.
Everywhere
I want to avoid that naturally. I don't want to say it. And look at me now, I'm so fluent. And now I'm on YouTube, now I'll be on a TV, I'll be famous. But that's also kind of not fair. When I wasn't fluent, I would never do that. So also question comes first. Is it because now I put things on YouTube that makes me more fluent, or because I became more fluent, now I allow myself to unhide that much?
I think they go hand in hand. I think they go.
I totally agree.
I think it's just not the case where things are separated suddenly. Everything goes towards each other. Perhaps with like a tilt more towards letting go and being fluent, and then letting go.
Right, so,
Chicken and the egg, isn't it?
like, I know you're Rama like a little bit better now, and I see that you'll be okay without external support. You don't really need support group. There are two types of support group. AA that you mentioned, it's kind of the original recovery ones, which is great. And there is other type support group which we all can experience 2 times a month on Monday, right? And that is not really support group, even though it's called that. It's a mini improvement days. So we can label things. We can call cancellation block release. We can call it hit and hold prolongation. It won't change a thing. But some labels, they confusing. So we better know what we're doing. And when we say support group, I would go back to AA. I would totally agree with you. But so internal, external powers. For some people who start, if you take this place where they go and be fluent, they will fall apart. You can't take that away from that.
I completely agree with your analysis of the stuttering. For me, it was when you advertise, it is really truly about you telling your subconscious that I'm comfortable being a stutterer. I really am comfortable using all the techniques, being in control of the beast, as you call it, Eugene.
Yes.
Because the beast controlled me for a long time. It's not about other people. Who gives a shit if you stutter? It is your subconscious which is creating reality. And it is your perceptions of how other people are looking at you. I read somewhere that there was a stutterer for 50 years. His first name is Ted. He's an American writer. And he was blind. And he stuttered, disappeared. Or he stuttered a lot less. Maybe 90% improvement. Because he was blind. So he didn't have the interactions of the other people, the negative feedback.
Blind myself now.
Okay? I'm not saying for everyone blind yourself now, but what I'm saying is that it was my interpretations of the feedback that I received as a child from adult people, from my teachers, maybe my parents, I don't know.
That's right.
That made me. I was a fairly outgoing child. I remember. But then when I was labeled, I was sent to speech therapy, which I actually enjoyed because I went there, had a few sweets, spoke to the speech therapy, played with the toys, learned to speak slower, really enjoyed myself out of class.
Yeah.
So I don't think there was any reason for me to not stutter because I actually enjoyed it. then for various reasons, I kept on this habit. And I think advertising is for yourself subconsciously to become comfortable with how you are perceived in the outside world.
That's a really, really good point about reinterpreting feedback, because fundamentally I think about that whole blind person who stopped stuttering after they became blind, was that what stuttering is basically fearing the kind of negative feedback on someone's face. When you start stuttering, you think, like, oh my god, they look a bit like that, or they look kind of puzzled and perhaps even frightened if you're really, really stuttering out of control. And basically kind of what that person did was eliminate that feedback entirely. He couldn't see anything of it, which is fantastic. And I think, basically reinterpreting the feedback or just ignoring the feedback altogether is probably like doing 70% of the job, isn't it? It is really, because that's fundamentally why the stutter gets worse, is seeing your boss's face drop as he sees you stuttering. That is a massive thing. If your boss smiles and is like, great, you're stuttering, fantastic, you would probably stutter a lot less. Or you would stutter intentionally and feel very much in control of your stuttering. So it's a case of like negative feedback, negative or positive feedback, basically.
My question to the group is, I assume you guys don't stutter when you're alone in your own room reading or speaking out aloud. Am I correct? You stutter?
I repeat things.
But do you stutter? Do you...
Well,
That is stuttering.
we have to
repeat
define stuttering. Like I define stuttering as a blocking only.
Okay.
So that I actually used to do it. Like I was in many speech therapy, and they told me like go alone in the room, take a mirror, and talk, and you will never stutter. I'm like, yeah, right. So I would block even worse in the mirror because I hit
What
my
about
face.
without a mirror?
Well, but now, well, I would block. I would block alone. Like we spoke to Broker Brothers. They asked me the same question. Yeah, I would block. I did, but now, like, now I get it. I think.
And
I
you?
think I stammer even if I'm alone. Like even if I'm like stroking a cat off, I can stammer there.
Really?
I've
I'm
stuttered
talking to the
before.
cat.
Obviously, like I think like 99% of the time I wouldn't stutter, but it's the fact that I have stuttered when I'm alone or when I'm talking to my dog.
Yeah.
But I do get that point about like why is it that we don't stutter alone? And I believe fundamentally it's because stuttering is a communication problem. It isn't a speech problem.
Thank you, Tom.
And I always try to say this, like it is the communication bit which is where we are struggling. Speech, were you to speak into a microphone to record like sound, you're going to be perfectly fine. Speech isn't the issue. It is communication. And I think that is, part of the reason why speech therapy isn't as great as it should be is because it's tackling the phonation, the larynx, the muscles and stuff, and it's like, this isn't the problem. It's up here. It's on the mindset. It
isn't
the problem. In my
a
eyes.
problem for us who learn, like, in essence, learn to stutter. While everyone else was learning to speak, we learned to stutter. But there are obviously groups that would help, but just.
But the worst thing is that people dig out really obscure papers from the 80s or 30s, saying like, oh look, this random person in like Texas found that people who stutter have like a slightly contorted larynx or something. It's like, I'm sorry, but it's really, really, really rubbish science that they're bringing up, and then kind of use it as like this is the case. And it's just, sorry, but the research indicates it's more of a communication than a speech.
Some people think that there is a difference in the brain or in the way that we process speech and the listening. What's your opinions, or have you researched anything?
When I've been explaining stammering, the explanation I've been using, this might be completely made up, so I don't know. But it's like one of the theories, which is like that when we're growing up, we might have had like some particular part of our our throat, mouth, lips, whatever, growing at a slightly different rate compared with the rest. So you have an awkward phase then. Then when it catches up, you have another awkward phase, but you've learned the behaviors to manage this slightly missized part of yourself.
Okay.
And then, because obviously growing up that is your formative period, it's really difficult to unlearn that.
Yeah.
Partly as you don't realise you've learned it as you're only like 3, and at the age 3 you're just absorbing absolutely everything. So my theory is it is a developmental thing, which gets coupled with the fact we have a brain and can learn, that we end up screwing ourselves over.
As someone who is applying for a master's in speech language therapy, this coming, I think it's November or October, I have been reading quite a lot about the actual the scientific literature that's out there about stuttering, and it's not that wide because stuttering is an under-researched topic for various reasons. One of which being that it isn't a serious disability; it's an indisability. And also, it can also be, it can also vary massively, and so on and so on. But my understanding of stuttering is that it is about the brain we have is fundamentally different in a certain region. I think it's the Broca region, actually. Funny enough, there's the Broca brothers name themselves over their own part of the brain where it's all going wrong. I know. Anyway, but. Anyway, there's a certain part of the brain.
Projector now by Broca brothers. Dudes, we actually love you. Like,
yeah,
no holding back. We believe in
Broca brothers are
brothers.
great.
Yeah,
I do like them.
Great people.
Yeah.
Anyway, but my
Don't sue
understanding
us.
is that stuttering is arrived at typically around the age of 3 or 4, and it can be stuttering in various forms, repetitions of words, sounds, blocks, or so on. And this always coincides with a massive upsurge of dopamine in the brain, because the brain is still developing, and this is when people tend to start stuttering, is around that point. And there is a coincidence, not necessarily a causation of dopamine, but then again, there is further evidence that dopamine antagonists and agonists have a massive effect on stuttering. So my opinion is that stuttering is a dopamine-related communication problem. Complicated, and there's probably a lot more I haven't said at all, but in my eyes I take the attitude that I've been reading about. I don't know enough about it to be conclusive.
This guy, not Dave Maguire, but Jason.
Jerry Maguire.
Yeah.
He's the American head of the NSA.
He's such a dick.
Now we're going to get sued by the NSA.
I have my own opinion. My opinion's quite different from your own. But what I will say though is that
Opinions
Jerry
of
Maguire.
Alexander Trident Voices podcast.
What I will say though that Jerry Maguire is doing a lot of good work into dopamine antagonists and agonists, and that's very interesting because I personally believe there's a very future for stutterers in relationship between dopamine. Just as much as people with ADHD have a dopamine problem, so can stutterers potentially have a problem with ADHD.
So, for the uneducated among us, because I clean forgot what dope means for.
So dopamine, essentially, I also forget myself. I just say dopamine.
Damn it.
But dopamine,
We made a podcast about it already.
Oh my god,
about
that's so
Jerry
much.
too, about dopamine and serotonin.
Okay, essentially, my understanding is that you have two kind of pleasure or reward chemicals. You've got dopamine and serotonin are like the big two.
Yeah.
And within those two, you have like a spectrum of like dopamine of 1, dopamine 2, dopamine 3, dopamine 4, and so on. But fundamentally, serotonin is like a long-term holistic pleasure that kind of I think feeds into all parts of the brain.
Okay.
Dopamine is like a pleasure reward kind of particle or fluid or something that only operates in a particular parts of the brain.
So, would it be that you get dopamine if you eat one sweet, serotonin if you think you have that sweet in the fridge, which you will have later on?
That is yes.
Yeah.
No, roughly that's the case, and that's
Okay, good.
dopamine is the short-term pleasure response, basically. Serotonin is the long-term. So, for instance, you might have like a belief about the sweet, like this sweet will make me a better, more holistic person, a happier person. That is the serotonin there operating.
Cool. Yeah.
And serotonin is a lot harder to obtain.
Yeah.
Dopamine is very easy to obtain.
Yeah.
That's why we have McDonald's.
Yeah.
We have TV.
Yeah.
We have fast cars, all that kind of stuff.
So to bring it back to what you were originally saying, is there, because there's a dopamine upsurge, does that mean
what the research indicates that people start to have abnormal dopamine levels in a particular part of the brain.
So you're saying that when people stutter, do they get more dopamine? Are they addicted to it?
No. I think
that's a good question. That's a very good question.
This sounds terrible, but I can't quite recall the exact data. But fundamentally, there are abnormal levels.
Yeah.
And abnormal could be too much. It could be too little.
So, send me after this. I'll read those articles.
There are so many.
Okay, I'll read some of those articles.
If you go on our chat, all articles already there, all the links already there.
Cool. Okay.
One question I had was, you mentioned at the outset that an easier lifestyle, getting married for example, would reduce the stress. So what percentage of stuttering is psychological and what percentage is due to the brain? I know you're not a doctor or a speech therapist, but what's your gut saying?
My gut saying is that fundamentally it is a genetic problem, but psychology is the biggest influencer. So I think...
Do you have stuttering in your family?
Yes. My mother still stutters, my uncle formerly stuttered, my great-grandfather stuttered.
So your uncle formerly, until what age did he stutter?
He stopped stuttering at the age of 18, so quite late. However, what I will say though is that when we're looking at children who stutter, I think it's like 85% stop stuttering by the age of 15 or something. So the whole like children stuttering thing is a completely different problem. They even stutter on different sounds. So there's a spectrum of stuttering. As I was saying, I think on the chat at one point, there's also neurogenic stuttering. So very much there's I believe a spectrum, just as much as there's a spectrum of autism, there's a spectrum of stuttering, but there's been intentional research and we don't know what the spectrum is. But anyway, back to the original question, I say about like 85% of it is psychological, 15% is genetic. But what I'm doing with my app, and maybe you don't know about this, but I've been doing for the past year an application where I basically record different aspects of my life. And then when I have enough data I can then see is there any pattern between, for example, the food I'm eating and whether or not I'm stuttering. I will then be able to know more, I'll be closer to a piece of evidence that will suggest there's a correlation or perhaps even a causation between certain foods which aren't psychological, which are probably just influencing the genetics and my speech. But that's in the future.
And would you also consider monitoring if you are stuttering on purpose on one day and then during the rest of the day you're stuttering less?
Yes. So how it operates is that I take a record or a report 3 times a day and ask myself an array of questions, like over 400 questions per day. It takes up 2 hours of my day every day. I do this, so it's a pretty mega
6 hours a day.
the investment of my time. But I do ask myself, am I controlling my speech? How much I'm avoiding words? What words I'm struggling on? whether I feel like I'm being eloquent, if I care about my speech, basically everything I can think of I ask myself. But I'll have to let you know, by the BSA conference in August the 31st, I think it is, I will have a proper kind of piece of paper saying,
nice.
this is what I found. But until then,
Um,
I can only keep stum.
do you guys think that post-traumatic stress disorder, like a big part of the stuttering? For example, like, well, in my case, I didn't notice at first that I was repeating sounds, that I was saying like my friends asked me like, oh, you Alex talk funny, you know, and then after that happened, then I started to notice, holy shit, I talk funny, and well, it was before me blocking, and then I go to school, and all this become worse and worse and worse and worse. So this. I think stuttering is it's uncontrollable first of all, but it's also anticipated.
Yeah. So in your opinion, you think it is a PTSD issue as well as other things?
Right, and the proof of it is name. People who stutter, well, I always, when I say people who stutter, I always mean myself. So people who stutter have problems with the name, and that because we have a special connection to the name, and we struggle on that the most because of that at first, and then we started on that because we have so much bad memories of and that makes it feared word.
Yeah, but the thing is, it is partly because you have to say your name every time. Like every time you meet someone new, you have to go shake their hands. You know? Always, a part of me blamed having to shake hands because you get some really long, awkward handshakes when you're stammering on your name. So, if you avoid the whole shaking hands thing, you can stop screwing up stammers for ages.
But do you think
because
that,
it's just you namaste, that'd be fine. That'd be cool.
do you think that stuttering, then there is an element of PTSD in stuttering?
Probably.
Yeah. Rama?
I would say that an event caused my stuttering, and it was a negative feedback that I saw. I think I can relate to Alex in his description of someone may have said something, and then I analyzed it and said, yes, I do talk funny, and then it built up. My son listens to YouTube, and there's a kids TV, and they're saying the alphabet. A apple, B banana. Is not fucking stuttering. That's the way they're teaching to say the alphabet. I was watching it. So it's called the phonetic alphabet, and they say a apple. That's what they do. And for some reason, we took it on to mean something greater, and that resulted in a lifetime of avoiding, holding back, rather than, so what if you stutter? I mean, I'm 42, Tom, so I'm 20 years older than you are. So from my point of view of life, I see things so differently now to how I was when I was 22. Completely different. Yes, you may be right that having a stress-free life, having a relaxed life, helps you to relax in yourself and just let go.
Very true. In terms of the PTSD, I think stuttering does carry an element of PTSD. Even now, when I'm relatively more fluent than I once was, I still have moments where I'm anticipating something and getting quite stressed about it. That's the hangover of the fact that for the past 15 years or 17 years, I've had a bad experience. So that still carries with me, even if I, find it fine and I'm fluent or I'm stuttering, I don't care about it. It still carries with me. So I think stuttering there is definitely a PTSD thing that is with stuttering. I think what's his name? Paul Brocklehurst. I'm not sure what his surname is, but he's posted on the BSA an article about PTSD because he's a speech language therapist, I think, and he said that it shares the same symptoms and is therefore belongs to a PTSD.
Cool.
Again, this can be found online. The BSA. I don't know. I think it's Paul Buckle.
If we can, we'll link some of these articles.
If we can.
If we can, fingers crossed. That'd be cool.
I'm not doing it.
Okay, well, I'll hack in and I'll but okay, Alex won't do it. I'll hack in, but I otherwise can't do it. And Tom is the one who has the information, who probably won't do it either.
We'll probably forget to do it.
About himself 6 hours.
Exactly. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a good opportunity to.
Part one. That was a part one.
Part one.
Because I think so many things unsaid.
Yep.
First of all, I wanted to plug in your book more because I'm reading it and stuff. Oh, it's blood, perfect. Just like I wanted it. Yeah, I think your book, if you're not writing only about money, we should talk about it more in terms of how rich thinking, not monetary thinking, but wealthy kind of thinking, because like wealth is not money and money is not wealth, right? So to widen the perspectives of thinking can help us with the stuttering. So I'm reading your book and I'm trying to smash it with everything. So will you come back here to us, or are you done with us?
He's been traumatized.
PTSD.
Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Rama special guest, very special. Alexander Kuzmenko was here. I'm stutter, fluent as fuck.
Eugene Wasowski Gallagher.
Rama Siva.
Tom Wheeler.
Yeah, bye for now.
Bye for now.
Ciao for now.